So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this evening's Accessory Dwelling Unit Workshop. This is being sponsored by Humboldt County as part of their Housing Forward Humboldt efforts. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Jess, who's going to go over some Zoom technical support items.
Thanks so much, Sherry. I want to turn my video on briefly and say hello. My name is Jess Candela. I'm a project manager with Housing Tools. I want to first thank everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. I'll be providing some technical support instructions for this evening's Housing Forward Humboldt ADU workshop. Next slide, please. If you are deaf or hard of hearing or prefer to read closed captions, we have enabled Zoom's live transcript feature. To view the closed captions, first you'll click Live Transcript at the bottom of your screen. Then you'll click the caret and select Show Subtitle. Instead, if you would like to hide the closed captions, you'll click Live Transcript at the bottom of your screen, click the caret, and then select Hide Subtitle. Next slide, please. We have 4 interactive features for the workshop tonight. First, we will have 6 polls. I will read the question and your answer choices aloud, and then you'll select your answer on the screen. Make sure you click the button at the bottom of the poll that reads Submit Poll. Polls are anonymous and results will be shared live for the first 5 polls. We have 1 advanced poll that we will run at the end of the workshop. If you have an older version of Zoom, you may not be able to participate in the poll, as advanced polls are unique to Zoom's newest version. You are invited to type an answer into the Q&A if you would like to participate in the poll but have an older version of Zoom. I'll let you know when we reach the 6th and final poll at the end of the workshop. Next is the chat. You'll see that you can't type in the chat. We've reserved this space to share technical support instructions and workshop resources. We'll open up the chat at the very end of the workshop so that attendees may share resources with us or one another. Next is the Q&A. You may type questions into the Q&A that you'd like for us to answer at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to add any questions into the Q&A at any time. You can find the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical difficulties and need support, please let us know via the Q&A. Next is the Raise Hand feature. If you'd like to ask a verbal question during the Q&A, you may use Zoom's Raise Hand feature at the bottom of your screen. When it's your turn, we'll ask you to unmute your microphone and ask your question. If you're calling in via phone, you can press *9 to raise and lower your hand. If we don't have time to get to all of the questions, we will collect remaining questions for our team to review after the workshop. Finally, if you're joining us via calling in on a phone and can join via the web, we recommend that you do so. The polls, chat, and Q&A features can only be used via the web. If you have a personal computer, a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone and have a Zoom account, you can enter the meeting ID for this workshop to join via the web. The meeting ID is 859-0340-3711. Again, that's 859-0340-3711. Next slide, please. We wanted to let you know that today's workshop will be recorded and posted on the county's YouTube channel. The purpose for recording this workshop is to make it available as a resource for community members, whether they attend or don't attend the workshop. Workshop attendees may choose to not use their full names when asking questions. Next slide, please. We have group agreements to share for tonight's virtual workshop. These help us to create a welcoming space for everyone to learn and participate together. The group agreements are as follows. Everyone has a seat at the table, and everyone is encouraged to participate. Please start your question with your name and role in the community if you are comfortable doing so. One person speaks at a time. All communication, whether verbal or in writing, must be polite and respectful of others. And any violations of these agreements will be cause for actions by the facilitators, including turning off microphones or expulsion from the workshop. Next slide, please. So what is Housing Forward Humboldt? It is an effort of the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department to partner with the community to increase the supply of housing and encourage housing that is affordable. The department invites the community to participate in a virtual workshop series held via Zoom. You can attend or watch the recordings of 3 workshops designed for property owners, current and future developers of housing, and residents interested in ADUs. Tonight's workshop is, of course, designed for residents interested in ADUs. Next slide, please. Okay, we have our first poll. So I'm going to launch that on the screen. You should see it on your screen now. Our question is, how did you hear about this event? And your answer choices are Humboldt County Facebook, Humboldt County website, email from Humboldt County, email from Housing Tools, local organization, radio, news station, or newspaper, word of mouth, or other. And I see that about half of us have responded, so I'll leave it open for about 10 more seconds. Okay, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and select your answer choice on the screen. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So again, our question was, how did you hear about this event? And your answer choices are Humboldt County Facebook with 3% of folks responding, Humboldt County website, 23%, email from Humboldt County, 26%, email from Housing Tools, 6%, local organization, 11%, radio, news station, or newspaper, 8%, word of mouth, 18%, and other 5%. Thanks so much for participating. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to briefly introduce our team. You'll have a chance to hear from team members throughout the presentation, especially during the Q&A, which will be at the end. For now, I'll read everyone's names, roles, and organizations. So from Housing Tools, we have myself, and I'll be providing tech support. Again, my name is Jess. We also have Sherry, who will be a facilitator. From Humboldt County, we have Keenan as our facilitator, and Andrew and Rudy as panelists. And from McKinleyville Community Services District, we have Pat, who will be a panelist. Again, you'll hear from all of these team members throughout the presentation, especially the Q&A. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Sherry.
All right, thank you, Jess. So here's our agenda for this evening, and we've actually gone through the first 3 items that you'll see listed here. So next, we're going to briefly go over some housing terms and definitions, just because there are some specific terms and definitions that we use that might not be familiar to everyone. And then we're going to launch directly into the heart of the matter, which is tonight's accessory dwelling unit workshop presentation. And then, as just mentioned, at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. We'll go over all of the Q&A that has been posted in the written questions that have been posted in the Q&A, and also the oral questions that we might receive from the folks on the telephone. And then we're going to go over resources and contact information for Humboldt County staff. So some of the terms and definitions we wanted to cover. The first one, of course, is accessory dwelling units, also referred to as ADUs. These are complete independent living facilities for 1 or more persons that are on the same lot as the primary structure. They can be attached or detached from the primary structure. They're also known as second units or granny flats. Affordable housing. Affordable housing actually means a couple of different things. The generally accepted measure for housing affordability is for a household to spend less than 30% of its gross household income on housing costs. So this includes utilities, rent, or mortgage, principal, and interest. In the context of, it says housing element here. We're not talking about the housing element, but just also in context of housing policy in general. Affordable housing generally focuses on housing for extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income households. And this type of housing generally receives public subsidies. Market rate housing is housing where the market, which means supply, demand, and other factors, set the cost to the occupant, and there are no public subsidies. Geographic Information System, or GIS. This is a spatial system that creates, manages, analyzing, and maps all types of data. Infill development refers to the process of developing vacant or underused parcels within existing incorporated areas that are already largely developed. And then tiny house. As you can see here, there are two types of tiny houses according to Humboldt County Code. One is one built on a permanent foundation. It must meet state and local zoning codes, and it's considered to be permanent housing. A movable tiny house is a house on wheels that is registered with the California Department of Motor Vehicles and meets certain safety standards. It can also be considered permanent housing.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. So our second poll is now on your screen. Our question is, what is your motivation for learning more about building an accessory dwelling unit, also known as an ADU? And you can select all that apply. Your answer choices are additional monthly income, a place for my family member to live, a place for my friend to live, a place for myself to live, generating more housing options for my community, or other. And again, you can select all that apply. Okay, I'm going to leave it open for about 10 more seconds. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and select your answer choices on your screen. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. So again, our question was, what is your motivation for learning more about building an ADU? Please select all that apply. Additional monthly income was 49%. A place for my family member to live, 43%. A place for my friend to live, 14%. A place for myself to live, 25%. Generating more housing options for my community, 65%, or other 19%. And those percentages add up to more than 100% because you can select more than one answer. Thanks so much for participating. Sherry, sorry, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to launch into the presentation itself on accessory dwelling units. We're going to start with some disclaimers. We're going to go through Humboldt County housing goals, the purpose of the workshop. We're going to do a brief introduction to ADUs, and then really a lot of the detail is going to be in a discussion about that Keenan's going to lead about the guidebook, the website, and additional resources and funding. So our disclaimers. One thing we want to note is that this workshop is intended for residents of unincorporated Humboldt County. So this includes places like McKinleyville, Myrtletown, and Bayside, as well as the many small communities in more rural areas. Some of the rules and information in this workshop will be different if you live in a city. We'd like to encourage attendees to please use the web GIS tool that you can find at this link to find out what jurisdiction your property is in and what rules apply. In addition, ADU laws are updated occasionally, including several state laws that went into effect in January of 2020. Some information in this workshop, therefore, may change in the future as laws are updated. So we'd like to encourage you to please verify any laws or rules with the county at the time that you're ready to build your ADU. So the county has some overarching housing goals, and ADUs really support these three goals. And this is housing production, housing diversity, and providing workforce housing. And these are some of the broad goals and priorities that are in the county's housing element. And again, ADUs can really support the county goals in a variety of ways through production of additional units through ADUs, providing more diversity for various income levels, and ensuring that the workforce has a place to live. So the purpose of tonight's workshop, First of all, is to try to demystify the process and assist community members with knowing what to expect when approaching your ADU project. County also wants to encourage the development of ADUs in the county by sharing information about the incentives that are available, funding, resources, and tools. And then finally, the goal is to also connect with the community and to help foster public and private collaboration to help the county meet its goals. So a little bit of an introduction to ADUs and their purpose. So from providing an affordable home for your family members, friends, or community members to helping you pay the mortgage, we know that many Humboldt County homeowners are interested in adding an ADU to their property. As we mentioned earlier, they go by a number of names. They're sometimes called granny flats, backyard cottages, in-law units, converted garages, second units. By whatever name, they can help meet the needs of residents while helping to create new housing for the community. An ADU also provides you as the homeowner with flexibility as your life changes. So whether it is used as a close but separate home for grown children, parents or grandparents, a way for you to downsize, an extension of your living space for a source of extra rental income, or all of the above, over time, an ADU can grow with you and your family. And although the process to build an ADU does take an investment of time and resources, many ADU owners find that it was very well worth it, and they feel a sense of accomplishment after building their dream ADU. ADUs come in many shapes and sizes, but they do have some consistent themes. They're always a self-contained home that is smaller than the main house, and they are legally part of the same property. They must have a kitchen, bathroom, and place to sleep. And they typically range from 150 square foot studios to 1,200 square foot homes with multiple bedrooms. Types of ADUs can include detached units, attached units, an ADU that's achieved through a remodel or an expansion of your home, an interior conversion, an apartment where the garage is converted into an apartment, or something above your garage.
Okay, it's time for our third poll. You'll see that on your screen now. Our question is, in your opinion or experience, what is the biggest obstacle to building an ADU? Your answer choices are starting the process, obtaining plans or permits, obtaining utilities, the cost of developing or building, hiring a contractor and subcontractors, managing the property and tenants, other, or not sure. Okay, I'll leave this open for about 10 more seconds. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and select your answer choice on your screen. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So again, our question was, in your opinion or experience, what is the biggest obstacle to building an ADU? Starting the process was 6%. Obtaining plans or permits, 18%. Obtaining utilities, 7%. The cost of developing or building, 52%. Hiring a contractor and subcontractors, 8%. Managing the property and tenants, 1%. Other, 1%. And not sure, 6%. Thanks so much for participating.
All right, Keenan, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, great. You can see and hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm Keenan Hilton. I am a planner in the long range planning department in the long range planning division, the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department. And I have been working on developing some new resources that the county can offer residents of Humboldt County that are considering building an accessory dwelling unit. One of the resources that we've been working on is this guidebook. So what is the ADU guidebook? It's a user-friendly resource. That's what we're aiming to create. It's designed to be read by the average community member who may or may not have ever applied for a permit, who may or may not have ever completed a building project. It's supposed to be your guide through the process from the first steps of brainstorming your project. You have an impulse, you're interested in ADUs, but you're not exactly sure what it means. Asking those initial questions that get your mind turning, and doing some sketches all the way through the step where you're finding tenants potentially to move in. So the aim is to be a comprehensive guide and an effort to put as many of the cards on the table as we can in a digestible way. So not finding a dozen forms from 3 different county departments. We're trying really hard to gather all the info, present it in a pretty readable way. It's a lot of information, but after looking through the resources, we're betting that community members will feel much more grounded in the process and know what the different steps are to develop an ADU in Humboldt County. Specifically, as was mentioned earlier, it is a focus on the unincorporated areas of Humboldt County, so outside of the cities, though a lot of the regulations come from the state and would and the exercises would still be useful, but it's tailored to the unincorporated areas. The guidebook document itself is in the final stages of editing. We're anticipating that it will be ready for wide release to the public next week. And it will be available on a website, which I will also be highlighting later in the presentation. There will be physical copies in our office, but the most accessible way to get it, the easiest way to access it, will definitely be through our website. If we got your email when you registered for this event, which I believe we got everyone's emails, we'll let you know when this resource is ready. It's really a centerpiece of the Housing Forward Humboldt initiative, and I am really excited to give a brief overview of what we cover inside of it. Next slide, please. So there are a number of different sections in the guidebook. The first is getting started, budgeting and finance, design, permits, and construction. So the planning and building department, if you've interacted with us before, it probably has been related to permits. So we're really, we're pushing our boundaries here as far as the way that we're engaging with the community and really trying to be supportive of community members aiming to build ADUs. And speaking on a wide array of topics that probably you're not used to talking to the planning department about. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the contents of the guidebook in order. Next slide, please. So the getting started section is really just about clarifying your goals. Why are you building an ADU? These are questions that will guide the rest of your process. So is it going to be for a family member? Is it going to be for a rental? Also, questions about your lot. What's the size that we're dealing with? How much space is there? What are the features on your lot that we're trying to plan around? These will dictate what type of ADU might be the best option for you, and it might dictate the length and cost of the process to get it permitted and built. Some questions that it asks, and in this section it covers a lot of different questions, but are you in a sewer and water district? If not, if you're on septic, you'll probably need to speak to environmental health, and it gives you exactly what the next step is depending on the factors of your site. Next slide, please. Next is budgeting and finance. And as we saw in the poll, this is a giant consideration for everyone looking to build right now. Prices of construction are up, and it's really important to make sure that these things pencil. So we go through some of the most important decisions relating to financing your project. These might have to do with choosing to go with a credit union or a mortgage broker. It also has to do with figuring out, like, for instance, how many bathrooms you're going to have in your ADU. We cover what types of loans are available and the different types of financing options, cash out refinance, home equity loans, home equity lines of credit. We go try to cover the pros and cons of each option and what might be the best option for you. We also cover how this might affect your taxes and the resale value of your property. I'm no expert on Board of Equalization, and so it's limited what I can share with you, but I do know that building an ADU, this does increase your property value. It will increase your tax burden. It does not prompt a reassessment of your primary dwelling. And it will obviously increase the value of your property if you look to sell. We have various for each of these sections, and I think probably it's especially important in the budgeting and finance. We have exercises that you can link to, that we have if you access it via the PDF online, you can just click directly to the exercise. We also have QR codes, and then also we are very clear on what the Humboldt ADU website is, and you'll be able to easily find the exercises on the website. Next slide, please. The guidebook covers design. This is the fun part. So you get to work with your designer, work with your draftsperson or your architect, and really try to figure out, how many bedrooms are you going to do? How are you going to incorporate storage? What's the natural light? How are you going to create privacy from the main residence? How big? And these are, this is really when it gets to be the creative part of the process. And we've outlined some of the most important considerations, both in terms of design with some of the exercises, and also with how to figure out what type of design professional you want to work with, if that's the direction that you're going to be going. What the typical costs are, what you can expect in a contract with a designer or an architect, what are the different steps in the design process, from the conceptual drawings, refining those, and figuring out the interplay between your architect and whoever's going to be doing the building on the site. There are several design build firms locally. Is that the direction you're going to go? So these types of questions. We also have in spotlights in the guidebook several different floor plans that you can look at for inspiration. These are floor plans that have been used by other folks in the community, and you can see how they've been able to use space efficiently, which is incredibly important when thinking about how to design an accessory dwelling unit. Next slide, please. Okay, I know that I said that design was the fun part, but really, actually, now we get to everyone's favorite, which is permitting. Okay, joking aside, the county and the state have made a concerted effort in the last few years to try to streamline this process, to try to make building an accessory dwelling unit as painless a process as possible when you're interacting with one of the governing agencies. And so one of the most important things, and this was potentially highlighted earlier in the presentation, but there were changes in California law in 2020 that made it so that there's a pathway for building an ADU basically everywhere where there's a pathway for building a residence. And so, and in many of those places, if residences are principally permitted, an accessory dwelling unit may also be principally permitted. There are some special site-specific factors, and I'll cover a couple of them. But many ADUs are just going to be a process of making sure that you've got the right zoning, making sure you've got the space on your parcel and you can meet your setbacks, and then getting a building permit and going through the building permit process. However, like I said, be aware of the fact that there are conditions on different sites that can trigger more review, and specifically the need for a planning permit. A couple examples would be if you're in the coastal zone, you know, your project would likely require a coastal development permit. If you've got a big wetland bordering the east side of your property, you know, this might be kind of tricky to figure out how we're going to meet those setbacks or figure out what the appropriate mitigations are. This is probably going to be a planning process. Are you, for instance, outside of a fire protection district? So this is going to apply to a lot of the folks in the more rural communities. Many rural communities are within a fire protection district. Many are not. And that, for instance, triggers the need for a special permit from the planning division, which you're going to need to get before you get a building permit. However, if you're inland, if you're on community sewer and water, you're in a residential neighborhood, you've got a big flat backyard. I know that describes some portion of properties in Humboldt County. We're probably looking at a pretty straightforward process. Okay, next slide, please. The guidebook also covers construction, and this goes into the part where you're hiring a contractor, you're actually you have your boots on the ground, you're working, you're having the building inspectors come out, you finished your planning process, and it has an overview of different styles of approaching that. Who's going to be your project manager? You're going to take that on yourself, the different considerations that you might have if you're trying to fill that role, or if you are hiring someone, what you can expect from them. We cover what the typical building costs are. So for instance, you might, and this is really important when considering what type of ADU you want to have, a junior ADU, which is just a conversion of an interior space in your house. And I'll show a couple photos that clarify this later, or a couple images. That could be as low a cost as $30,000 to complete this work. Whereas if you build a brand new detached ADU, 1,000 square feet, you could be looking at a price tag closer to $300,000, $400,000. So there's a wide array of things, and we're trying to steer you towards what makes the most sense for you. Again, going by cost of different types of ADUs, the junior accessory dwelling unit that's built within the existing structure is, of course, 10 out of 10 times going to be the least expensive option. But also going over weighing the differences between doing the site build ADU versus, for instance, getting a manufactured house. That there are some potential cost savings, but actually from what we can tell, it might not be as big of a difference as you might expect once all told, trying to get manufactured house onto the site. And then some cost examples. We highlight the real costs from people that have gone through the process with the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department. Next slide, please. Alternative owner builder. We get a lot of questions on this, and to go into detail, we have Rudy, who is going to be available for the Q&A, who is a senior building inspector and very well versed in all of the different parts of AOB and really can answer any other building questions that you may have. But from 1,000 feet, this is for residences that are outside of community water and sewer districts, so in rural areas. And the property owner is taking responsibility for some of the safety aspects of their structure. And there are how this is manifests that there are slightly fewer inspections, and this cuts down on your permitting cost by a bit. So and AOB, these provisions do apply to ADUs. I think that it requires that you are the resident of either the primary residence or the ADU on the parcel. But this is a permitting pathway that is slightly less expensive, that is open for people looking to build accessory dwelling units. Next slide, please. Okay, great. I am actually going to take the opportunity to have a sip of water. Now moving on to the ADU website. This is another very exciting tool that I've been working with some of our partners at the firm Baird and Driscoll down in the Bay Area to put together this resource for Humboldt County. And I'm really excited to be able to unveil it this evening. In terms of the content of the site, a lot is pulled from the guidebook, and the guidebook will be available primarily on this website. However, the website does go beyond the guidebook in some very exciting ways that are interactive, and I am just, again, so jazzed to be able to share this. Next slide, please. So the first tool is the ADU calculator. And I got to start with a very big disclaimer on this one. This is not a scientific tool. The various dynamics that we're trying to kind of pull together in this tool are complex, they're evolving. And of course, county staff doesn't always have a perfect read on it, but we have been collaborating with local realtors, local contractors to try to get the numbers tuned on this tool. The idea is that we're taking all of these different inputs to be able to give you a rough idea of your construction costs and how that goes out to being monthly costs of building an accessory dwelling unit. And then also being able to project what potential rents are. Some of these different factors you can change. So the ADU calculator knows, for instance, that adding another bathroom those are more expensive square feet than adding another bedroom. And so it's an intelligent tool, and you can toggle with what your square footage is, with how many bedrooms you have, with how many with which jurisdiction you're in. Another really exciting aspect about the development of this tool is that it was developed in partnership with the planning divisions of some of the other cities in the region. We partnered with Eureka, Arcata, Blue Lake, Trinidad, and Ferndale. And it was great. So, because two things, one being the fact that the housing markets in different places, for instance, comparing Arcata with Garberville, right? There are some different dynamics at play. And so it wouldn't be correct to give the same projected construction costs and projected rents in these two markets. So we've been able to get a far more tailored idea of what the construction costs might be. And of course, this thing is still in evolution. So if there are experts on the call and you'd be willing to offer some feedback telling us, yeah, that looks right. Hey, that, I think that would be a little higher, a little lower, please reach out. it's been a great learning process so far, and we're trying to get this tool as accurate as we can for the community. But that said, the point is to just give you a rough idea. What are the different factors? What are the different costs? What do we think is the range that you should be prepared for when you're approaching a building project like this? Next slide, please. Website address tool. So this one's still in process. I think that it may be ready in, I mean, I'm kind of making this up, but perhaps in a month. And this, but it's a really important tool. It's a really exciting tool. And so what this will allow you to do is take our web GIS. If you've ever been on it before, it's accessible on the main Humboldt County website. It has so much information. Not all of it is relevant to the question of ADUs, and the layers that are relevant to the construction of ADUs are not all in one place. So our solution to that problem is to create a tool that only has the layers that are relevant to your ADU project. So these include, are you in the coastal zone? Are you near an earthquake fault? Are you in an area of liquefaction where the ground in certain conditions will behave as a liquid? Are you, for instance, inside or outside of the fire protection district? Are you, anyway, it has all of these different factors and maps them. And when you look up your parcel, it'll tell you whether you're in the green in this category, or if there are any categories where we go, hey, this actually might be an area of concern. Because these mostly are, although clearly there's no replacement for talking with a planner and looking at the specifics of your site. You can tell a lot from GIS on the number of obstacles that you may or may not be facing. And we are trying to bring this to you to be able to access from your living room. And yeah, so stay tuned on that, but it should be available on the ADU website. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and so I think perhaps I made mention to these colors, but we're gonna have a color coding system. Green means you're all good. At least from what we can tell, you shouldn't have too many obstacles in developing an ADU on your parcel. Yellow will mean there's at least one thing that we think you should talk to a planner about that may make the process that you go through slightly more complicated, or you may need to jump through one hoop. An example being if you're outside of community water and sewer and you need to add another septic tank, or you need to redo your septic to be able to provide extra capacity for the accessory dwelling unit. This can be a big obstacle. It's not actually a planning question. It would be through the Division of Environmental Health, but we do want to alert you to that as early in the process as possible, which again is what we're trying to do with this guidebook and the website resource, is just try to alert you to anything that you might run into a process. We're not trying to have any gotchas, but we're trying to reduce and eliminate gotcha moments in the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's see if I can get the screen share going and show you the website. All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, it looks great, Keenan.
Okay, awesome. So the website address you see up here, humboldtadu.org. I think .com will also get you here. And this website is live. It's the soft launch. Not all of the tools and resources that will eventually be featured on it are live yet. I'm expecting that we should have the substantially final version by next week, which is, again, extremely exciting. But this already has a lot of tools, and I absolutely encourage you to poke around, tell your friends, tell your family members, even if your kids aren't building yet, let them know this is available. For all residents of Humboldt County and beyond, if anyone else is curious. Okay, back to the tour. This is an ADU that was built recently in Humboldt County. We've got our definition, links to our ADU 101, examples of different floor plans, the steps in building an ADU. A lot of this content, as I mentioned, was pulled from the guidebook document. We also have a couple different highlights of stories of different people in Humboldt County who have developed accessory dwelling units, and they share a little bit about what their process was. Why an ADU 101. Okay, here are the different options. Detached, it's a freestanding structure. Attached, new or converted, sharing at least one wall. A remodel or expansion. Interior conversion, you take that attic space and turn it into a living space. Convert your garage. The benefits of building an ADU: family, financial security, flexibility. I think that this is one of the most exciting parts about ADUs, really is the fact that I think a lot of folks, for instance, you build an ADU and your kid comes back from college and COVID happens, your kid comes back from college, needs a place to land, can stay there for a couple of years, but then when they move on and go somewhere else, well, now you've got a rental space. It just adds a level of versatility to your property. And then community benefit. I was really excited to see how many folks on the call are motivated by the community benefits of increasing housing in our community via ADUs. Floor plans. We've got a bunch of different example floor plans that you can look at for inspiration. Stories. And this, I think one of the slides, we cover this a little bit more, but we conducted some interviews with community members, and we actually did a video profile of these folks, Thomas and Tara. Great video profile. You get to see inside their ADU, you get to see the backyard. Resources, we've got that calculator that we talked about, the glossary of terms, access to the guidebook, FAQs, summary of state laws. Build, and this really mirrors the guidebook, but you can access kind of an abbreviated version of the same information there. And then lastly, the move in, an introduction to being a landlord. So this is the Humboldt ADU site. Again, humboldtadu.org. I encourage you to check it out. The site is live. And with that, we'll go back to our PowerPoint.
I'll get back to the slide we were on just a second.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we're a couple slides further.
Okay.
There
Thank
we
you.
were.
Yes, we were. All right. We were at the fourth poll. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So our fourth poll is on your screen now. Our question is, how interested would you be in an in-person ADU fair staffed by the county, cities, community services districts, lenders, and utilities providers? You could engage one-on-one to ask questions, and the fair would likely be held in the Humboldt Bay region. And your answer choices are extremely interested, very interested, somewhat interested, slightly interested, or not at all interested. I'll leave this open for about 15 more seconds. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and select your answer choice on your screen. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Again, our question was, how interested would you be in an in-person ADU fair staffed by the county, cities, community services districts, lenders, and utility providers? You could engage one-on-one to ask questions, and the fair would likely be held in the Humboldt Bay region. For extremely interested, we had 36%, very interested, 31%, somewhat interested, 21%, slightly interested, 12%, and not at all interested, 0%. Thanks so much for letting us know. Next slide, please.
It makes me feel so popular that no one voted for not at all interested. Okay. The ADU Spotlight Project. So these were the stories that we just saw on the screen share of the website. So the local community members that built their ADUs and then shared their stories with us. In October 2021, we reached out to the community to try to solicit participation and got responses. And then people were generous and they let us into their homes. We conducted interviews and were able to take photos and in one case do a video interview. And it's just phenomenal, of course. And I think especially when trying to get kind of the gears turning about what this might look like, to be able to see these examples of folks right here in Humboldt County, and how they approached their project, what their motivations were, what the challenges were, and also some of the different price points with the different approaches. I think it's just so valuable to be able to see what some concrete experiences were. Next slide, please. Yeah, here they were, our lovely participants. I really, this is one of the parts of the process that was the most exciting, because I really do think that that putting the human face, putting the human story to this, of course, it's why we talk about housing as kind of an abstract community need, or housing for the workforce, but really, of course, it's just members of our community, and we're looking for places to live, looking for a way to pay the mortgage, looking for the ability to have your aging parent be close, but still have their own space, and getting that level of the personalized story. That's really why accessory dwelling units are important and exciting. Next slide, please. So we do get a lot of questions about our pre-reviewed plans. Humboldt County Planning Department does have 3 sets of pre-reviewed plans, and these have gone through much of the plan check process in the building division. They're available to the public at no cost. There are site-specific factors that need to be addressed in all cases. So there's no such thing as a 100% pre-approved plan, because, for instance, the geology of your site is probably different from the geology of the folks at the other end of the county. Also, your energy calculations are going to be different. Are you hidden beneath a bunch of trees? Are you wide out in the open? Are you in Willow Creek? Are you in Manila? So Rudy can speak more during the question and answer about what using a pre-approved plan might look like and what some of the challenges might be. Next slide, please. Okay. ADU code. So if you want to go to the source, because we summarize a lot of this stuff in the guidebook and on the website, but the code is available. Anyone can read it. And these are the rules for accessory dwelling units within the county of Humboldt. That is the unincorporated area of the county of Humboldt, the cities all have their own regulations. And yeah, I guess get your cup of coffee. Also, probably get a glass of water for reading the county code, because it's a little dry. But it does tell you exactly what you can do and where. One detail from the code that I want to be sure to highlight is that there is a specific prohibition for building an ADU for a short-term rental. Short-term rental means less than 30 days. So that means you're not allowed to build an ADU for Airbnb or for Vrbo. The purpose is to make room for your family. The purpose is to provide housing for folks in the community. Next slide, please. So going to take a quick detour. The cousin of the accessory dwelling unit is the tiny house village. And this is something that is an identified goal within our adopted housing element. We have not yet adopted the ordinance to allow for a tiny house village, but what you see here is the approach. This is what was outlined in the housing element. So allow tiny house villages by right in all zones that allow multifamily. It's defined as grouping 3 or more houses or detached bedrooms with a central sanitary, laundry, cooking, and dining facility. And it has to meet some objective development standards that I believe my fellow planner has been working on those, but as I said, they haven't been adopted yet. But stay tuned, because I know that this is a popular topic. Next slide, please. And then a quick guide to tiny houses and how they fit within the framework of ADUs, I mean, and beyond. But since we're focusing on ADUs this evening, in the inland area, can your tiny house on a foundation be an ADU? Yes. Can your movable tiny house be an ADU? Yes. In the coastal zone, can your permanent on a foundation tiny house be an ADU? Yes, but not movable. So that's how tiny houses interface with accessory dwelling unit provisions. Next slide, please. Safe home program. I want to highlight this. So if you have an accessory dwelling unit on your property and it is not permitted, we have a program that is a pathway to legalize your accessory dwelling unit, and it's called the Safe Home Program. So this reduces your liability, it reduces risks to the occupants, of course, all of the benefits of having a structure meet the building code, which just makes it safer. It probably raises your resale value. And the benefit that's offered through Safe Homes is that there's no penalty. So there's no code enforcement part of you coming forward and saying, hey, I've got this unpermitted structure. It's just the building process. Next slide, please. And I was able to get a hold of someone at PG&E to ask them. Again, as I said, we're trying to tell you what your process is going to be like. And the important detail that I got out is right there in step 1, that they recommend applying about 12 months before you need the service to be installed. So this is one of those things that once you know you're going to do it, keep in mind a full year before you're finalizing, before you're planning on having anyone move into that space. If you need a separate meter for this thing, its own electrical service, talk to PG&E. Next slide, please. Yeah, right. So I guess it's just more summary of what their different steps are. And then that link, I know it's not easy necessarily to write down a link. Maybe you can take a screen grab or something. And the slides, I think, will be available on our website. We'll see if we can make that happen. But apparently a lot of the information is on that link by following that link. Next slide, please. An additional resource that we want to highlight is the Humboldt Tenant Landlord Collaboration. And this is a program offered through Cal Poly Humboldt. I just learned about it. I presume it's new. And this is an education program to promote best practices. And this is both geared towards on the tenant side. I think it's trying to coach some students in how to be a responsible tenant, how to remember to take out the trash and treat a home well, which I know many students know how to do, and some might need some coaching. And then also, and this is why we bring it up this evening, is that it also gives a summary of the responsibilities of a landlord, and also what kind of the best practices are, and how to maintain a great spot for a great experience for landlords and tenants on the North Coast. So check it out if you're interested. Next slide, please. Oh, more details on that. So mold and pest prevention, a 10-module certification program. Of course, it's all free. And yeah, right. It does seem like that's the goal of improving the relationships, tenant-landlord relationships, and community feeling throughout Humboldt. Next slide, please. So next, there is an ADU grant program through California, the California Housing Finance Agency. And again, if there are more specific questions on this, Andrew Whitney, during the question and answer, who is a housing and grants coordinator within the planning and building department, can offer more details. But it provides up to $40,000 to reimburse pre-development and non-recurring costs associated with constructing an ADU. So it's only available to homeowners with low to moderate incomes, which means $142,000 for Humboldt County. So check it out. Seems like it could be a really great asset. Next slide, please. Quick summary of the ADU grant application process. So it gets reviewed, loan approval, lender approves construction loan, pre-development work starts, then the grant gets dispersed. And again, I presume that all of this information and far more would be available on their website. Next slide, please. And then we also are pursuing a county loan program. We have an application that is in process. This has been a goal. What we're hoping for is that it would be a 3% simple interest loan program, fully deferred for 30 years. So eligible borrowers would own their home and would need to be at or below 80% median area median income. So we submitted the application, and we're hoping for good news on this program. And this is another one that Andrew Whitney could speak to. Pretty sure that he submitted that application for us. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks so much, Keenan. I'm just going to run through our resources here, and the slides will be sent out as a PDF to all the folks who attended the workshop, as well as folks who registered but weren't able to attend. The slides will also be posted on the Housing and Grants webpage of Humboldt County. I just put that link in the chat. So it'll be a PDF. So these will be clickable links in the PDF. The resources that we'll share with you from Humboldt County include the Humboldt ADU website, which Keenan previewed tonight, ADU plans, ADU code, the housing and grants page, the long range planning page, the safe home program, and web GIS. So those are all Humboldt County resources. And then from local and state organizations, there's links to the California Department of Housing and Community Development ADU Handbook, the Cal HFA ADU Grant Program, and Cal Poly's Humboldt Tenant Landlord Collaboration program as well. So again, that will be sent out with these slides as a PDF, so you can click all of those links. Next slide, please. So we're going to introduce our panelists. We introduced them briefly at the very beginning of the session. So we're going to start with the Humboldt County team members, Andrew, Keenan, and Rudy, and then move to Pat from McKinleyville Community Services District. So Andrew, could you please provide your name, role, and department?
Hello there. My name is Andrew Whitney. I'm with the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department, and I am the Housing and Grants Program Coordinator. So I write and administer grants as well as coordinate housing related programs with the county.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And Keenan, could you reintroduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Keenan Hilton. I am a planner in the Long Range Planning Division of the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department.
Thank you. And Rudy?
Yeah, my name is Rudy Marangi. I'm a building inspector with the Humboldt County Building Division.
Great, thank you. And we'll move to Pat from McKinleyville Community Services District.
I'm Pat Kaspari. I'm the general manager of McKinleyville Community Services District.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So we're going to move into our Q&A. If you haven't had a chance yet, please feel free to type questions into the Q&A that you'd like us to answer. If you'd like to ask a verbal question, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute your microphone and ask your question. If you're calling in via phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. I'm going to start with the written questions and then I'll move back and forth between written and verbal questions. If we don't have time to get to all of the questions, we'll collect them for our team to review after the workshop. And before I jump into our questions, I also want to point out to folks that there are about 15 answered questions in the Q&A. So all attendees, if you want to click that Q&A button, if you're on a computer or a tablet, a smartphone, you can look at the questions that have been asked and then answered, especially by our panelists, Rudy and Pat, who have provided really helpful, specific answers, links. So go ahead and take a look at those and we'll move to our questions that have not been answered yet. So I'm going to go in order. So we're going to go back all the way from 5:45 this evening. So our first question is from Annalise. Annalise asks, are there grants available for property owners interested in developing ADUs? If so, where can one apply?
And I think that I am going to ask Andrew Whitney to chime in on this one.
Yeah. So Annalise, there is the Cal HFA ADU grant program, and we provided the link to that program. I believe it covers up to $25,000 of pre-development costs for ADU development. Although I have not, my internet connection is unstable. Thank you, suddenly. I haven't heard of any, are no grant programs right now that I'm aware of that will provide grants to property owners to build ADUs. As Keenan mentioned, we have applied for funding over several years to create a loan fund to assist lower income homeowners with loan funding to develop accessory dwelling units. So we're hoping that we will get funded and we'll be rolling that program out maybe this summer if we're lucky. So hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Andrew. Our next question is, what are the areas intended for the ADUs? So Keena, maybe you can talk about the unincorporated versus incorporated piece again.
Okay, so I work for the Planning and Building Department of Humboldt County. And so Humboldt County is all of the areas that are outside of the incorporated cities. So outside of Eureka, Arcata, Ferndale, Fortuna, Rio Dell, Blue Lake, Trinidad. And so I can't speak to, the specific regulations in those towns. Though again, a lot of this comes from state law. So similar rules would probably be found in those places, but I am speaking about unincorporated county. And the areas that we're talking about where ADUs would be developed really are the areas that allow for residential uses. So these are mostly the residentially zoned properties. It's, it's not industrial, it's not commercial. It's, although they are allowed in timberland production zone, they are allowed in agricultural zones, because in those zones, residences are allowable uses. So if you're in a zone and building a residence is one of the allowable uses, it's likely that you can build an ADU. Can't give a blanket statement because there are a lot of different site conditions and there are a lot of different situations in Humboldt County. But if you have a property on which a primary residence can be built, it's likely that you can build an ADU.
Thanks, Keenan. We're going to go to an attendee that has their hand raised for a verbal question. So Marion, I'm going to unmute your microphone if you can accept that on your end and then ask your question.
Okay, hi, thank you very much. So I want some clarification about property that's in the coastal zone in unincorporated McKinleyville. So maybe Pat knows the answer, Pat Kaspari. So is there a separate process? First, I apply for permit from the county to be able to build in the coastal zone, and then I separately apply for a building permit. This is for a tiny house, an already built module. Please clarify. Thank you.
So, hi, this is Keenan Hilton, and I'll let Pat chime in a second. But for the process that how you would interface with the planning and building department, if you're in the coastal zone, we would have to look at the map. So it'd be good to have a conversation with a planner. And in the future, you might be able to use our GIS lookup tool. So hopefully that'll be available in the next month or so. But for the time being, talk to a planner, and the planner will look up your property on GIS and click through a number of the different layers. I can't tell you for sure what your process is going to be, just as a generic answer. But if you're in a residential zone, there's probably a path forward for you. It may require a coastal development permit, and that would need to precede getting a building permit. And then of course we would look at any other site specific considerations, but calling the planner. So calling our main line, which I don't know if you have a pen right now, but it's 445-7541, and asking to speak to a planner, and they'll click through the GIS layer and be able to tell you what the constraints are on the property. And then I don't know, Pat, if you'd like to chime in on what the considerations would be with MCSD.
I will chime in just briefly. Marion, based on the question you typed into the chat as well, it does sound like you already talked to the Coastal Commission. That likely means if they told you that it's in the county jurisdiction, that likely means you will have to get a coastal development permit through the county. So like Keenan just said, I would talk to a planner, let them take a look at it, and you likely will be running that stuff through the county and get your coastal development permit and then your building permit.
Great, thank you. Our next question, Keenan, hopefully you can answer this. Does the guide cover available grant funds? That was the guidebook.
Let me take a quick look. I don't think that the guidebook specifically covers available grant funds. I think that would be something to actually reach out to Andrew about. Yeah, the guidebook does not specifically cover grants, but we have a housing and grant coordinator, and there is a housing and grant webpage on our county planning and building website that has some more information about some of the various programs that we have.
Yeah, so in terms of grants, the only thing that I'm aware of right now is the Cal HFA grant program. We are working on establishing a preferential rate and term loan program, but we have not received funding for that yet. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of grants available to private landowners to develop housing. Maybe we should change that, but that's the way it is right now.
Thank you. Our next question is that square foot price for a new construction? Would that apply for a garage conversion, or would that generally be considerably more affordable? And Keenan, I believe this was when we were talking about the ADU calculator slide. There is that average square foot price on the slide.
Yeah, very good question. And so, as our general guide, because again, there are a lot of different factors. Of course, the market has been extremely volatile, and so prices have been all over the place for construction materials, which greatly affects the cost of developing. Also, of course, we've had interesting things happening in the labor market, and so the range that we give is $200 to $400, which is a very big range for developing. And then also, of course, like all of the considerations, like, are you using more inexpensive materials, or are you using more expensive materials? What types of finishes are you doing? The very nice tiles in your bathroom, or are we going with a far cheaper option? So it is really hard to generalize because there are a lot of different types of projects, but generally speaking, we think that probably typical right now is probably somewhere in the like $300 per square foot range for a detached ADU. A garage conversion is going to be considerably cheaper. Again, talking with different contractors, I heard slightly different figures. So it's depending on who you work with, depending on how you approach the project, just take this with a big grain of salt. But as compared with that kind of 300-ish range, garage conversion, I think might be closer to like $180 a square foot, give or take. Probably quite a lot, depending on the condition of the garage. But it is going to be, it typically is far less expensive to do a garage conversion than to do a new stick build.
Thanks, Keenan. Our next question is, are there any codes or laws that pertain to Indian reservations? What if a factory-built ADU for sale that was located on the Hoopa reservation and offered them to off-res community?
So, great question. The planning department doesn't have jurisdiction over the areas that are, tribal trust lands. So as far as your building projects out there, that's a different process that I am not well versed in. But as far as units that are, I think it sounded like produced on a reservation and then brought off, those would need to meet building codes. But I think that it is possible to get some of these prefabricated units up to building code. And I don't know, Rudy, if you have anything to chime in on that question.
Yeah, so manufactured housing is regulated through the state. So if you have a manufactured building that was constructed on a reservation, I would contact the state housing department and see what kind of input they have about it. The Humboldt County building department's only concern is going to be the foundation. So you're going to have to design a foundation and submit that to us. But the manufactured home is all gone through the state. So I would ask them that question. They'll probably be able to answer that for you.
So yeah, that would be the Department of Housing and Community Development that permits manufactured homes.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay. Our next question is, what type of environmental protections for wildlife, trees, and wet areas will be reviewed when evaluating if the parcel is suitable for an ADU?
Yeah, excellent question. So there are, of course, in the inland area, the protections for streamside management areas, which it's streamside management and wetland areas. And so if you are within, for intermittent streams, it's 50 feet, and for perennial streams, it's 100 feet. If your development project, and then for wetlands, if it's an intermittent wetland, then it's, I think, also 50 feet. And if it's a perennial wetland, then I believe it's 150 feet. If you are trying to develop within those buffer areas, you would need to get a special permit. And part of that special permit would be doing biological study on your site and figuring out what the best way to minimize those potential impacts to those resources, what those mitigation measures would be. And so, and then of course, if it's possible to, if you have a building site that's outside of the streamside management area, I mean, by virtue of the fact that you wouldn't need to get a special permit and do a bio study, there's a clear incentive to pick a building site that is not near a stream. But it is possible, but we do absolutely do study to minimize any potential impacts on those natural resources, and which would include, again, potential impacts on trees and streamside management areas and so forth. And then in coastal areas, if you're having potential impacts on coastal natural resources, and Andrew, I don't know if you've worked with this, but it's that there are some areas where development essentially isn't allowed. Yeah, Andrew or Rudy, if either of you have something to chime in on coastal zone.
Yeah, all bets are off when you're in the coastal zone, especially if you're talking about a tsunami inundation area. I know that areas of Manila will not allow new units based on the tsunami inundation threat. And that includes areas on the Samoa Peninsula as well. So that's going to be something you would want to consult a planner early on in the process. And Keenan gave the planner on duty number, and I think we should put that up again. I don't have it on the top of my mind, but certainly we do have planning staff. If you're in the unincorporated county, give us a call and keep trying until you get a.
And do you have anything to add to that, Rudy, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, the building division's primary concern is the streamside management areas and the wetlands. Beyond that, I think you guys pretty much covered it.
Okay, our next question is the stay length the only difference between an ADU and an Airbnb or vacation rental? Or are there structural differences?
Yeah, so to chime in on that, Airbnb and Vrbo, these are what we consider short-term rentals. So for less than 30 days. And that's the threshold at which something is considered, I think, housing, is when you're having people stay for a term that is longer than 30 days. So yeah, that really is that's the difference. In order to have I think in order to have a permitted Airbnb or Vrbo, it has to be a dwelling unit. And so with, a kitchen and a bathroom and so forth. Or, I mean, actually, you can have an Airbnb or Vrbo that is inside of your house, like just doing a room. So I guess I take that back. But for the purposes of Airbnbs, or for ADUs, the question is, it could be exactly the same structure, but it is just the length of stay. And so for ADUs, we require that the length of a rental term be more than 30 days.
Okay, and Keenan, we might need more info for this question, but I'll ask it. Does PG&E require the same contact for solar?
Rudy might want to jump in here, but we provided information, basically a fact sheet on establishing a new electrical service for a housing unit. So that could be a new house, or it could be a new accessory dwelling unit on a already developed property. So if you're putting a solar system on, and Rudy is the one to ask about this, I don't know that you would necessarily need that same contact period that you would need for establishing a new service. But I'm gonna let.
Yeah, I tried to contact PG&E before this, and I had trouble getting a hold of them. I'm not sure about that. That would just, you'd want to talk to PG&E directly.
The other resource is the electrical contractors are really good at dealing with PG&E. And that was one recommendation that someone made to me, was get an experienced electrical contractor on your team to take care of that, because they know how to grease the skids and get the project.
Okay, our next question is the Safe Home program available for all of Humboldt County or only unincorporated Humboldt County?
Great question. The Safe Home program is a program of the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department. So that would be just the unincorporated areas. The cities may have comparable programs. I unfortunately don't know the answer to that, but Safe Home programs is just for unincorporated.
Thank you. Our next question is, are neighbors notified of the proposed process and have any input?
Yeah, great question. So if an ADU only requires a building permit, then there's no public process. So that is kind of the scenario. I mean, again, it applies in more cases than this, but let's just say you have a fair sized lot, the backyard is flat, it's single family residential, you have plenty of space, you can meet your setbacks, you're on community water, you're within a fire protection district, you're just going to need to get a building permit. There's no notice. Of course, we encourage you to talk with your neighbors to address any potential concerns, but it's not a public process as far as the planning and building department is concerned. That said, if your project does trigger the need for a special permit, which an example of this would be you're in an area just outside of Arcata, you're in an area that's mapped for liquefaction. Well, liquefaction is one of the things that triggers the need for a special permit. So that means that when it comes time to make a decision on your planning permit application, there is going to be notice sent to to the neighbors. And I believe that if there's no controversy, then it, it'll just get signed. But then, but they would have the opportunity to contest it or to raise concerns once it is that special permit process.
Thanks, Keenan. Our next question is, are the grant applications available now? And I'm going to put a link in the chat to Cal HFA's ADU grant program. And then Andrew, maybe you can talk about the timeline for Humboldt County's application for the grant program, or for the loan program, excuse me.
Yeah, so we applied
Andrew,
for
sorry, you're
grant
breaking up quite a bit. You
to
can,
establish a loan program. So we will not be making. All right. No.
that's much better. Yes, thank you.
All right. If we are funded, we won't have, the county will not offer grants to create accessory dwelling units in the foreseeable future. Things could change, but right now we will offer loans. The grant program, just put in the chat the link to that program at the Cal Housing Financing Agency. That is not affiliated with the county. And I have not talked to anyone that has successfully received one of those grants yet. But certainly, if you do, please let us know, and we would like to hear how it went. So I'm hoping that there'll be a brave soul that will lead the charge.
Thanks, Andrew. Our next question is, I want to add on to my existing house, not get an ADU. What financing methods would you recommend for me beyond the HELOC? Thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Hi, Vicki. This, I think the home equity line of credit, which is the HELOC, may be the best vehicle to do your addition. And I think that's going to be about as good as you're going to find. So that's pretty much it as far as I know. Talk to a lender.
Okay, our next question is, do pre-approved plans include Title 24 energy calculations?
I'll pass this one off to Rudy.
Yeah, so they do not. And that's because the orientation of your proposed building matters. And so there'll have to be a custom energy calculations for those pre-approved plans.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is the process to get someone from the city office to come out to our property and determine the size we can build?
I'll jump in on this just because I built an ADU in the city, and you may not be able to get them to come out to your property if you're in the city. You'll probably go to the planning department of whatever city you're in, whether that's Eureka, Arcata, Fortuna, Ferndale, Blue Lake, Trinity, for the 7, and talk to them, have your address and parcel number available, and they should be able to tell you what the setback requirements will be for any development that you might be considering. And then beyond that, it's up to you to determine what size you can build within those setbacks. And, I think Rudy does a lot of this type of work. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so if you're in the county, you pay some pre-application fees, roughly between $100 and $400, and we can send an inspector out there. You'll have to submit a site plan, and so the inspector will go out there with you on site and kind of look at the site plan and kind of have that conversation with you, so we can do that in the county. Right now, that is about to change. So yeah, that might not actually be available in a few months, but as it is currently, you can have an inspector come on site and kind of walk your site with you.
Our next question is, what if your building plan has an abnormal design, construction plan, and or material in mind?
So basically, if you get an engineer to stamp your plans, if you have something that's outside the prescriptive requirements of the building code, then you just have to get an engineer to stamp that design, and we'll be okay with that.
Thanks, Rudy. Our next question is, how does SB 9 and SB 10 come into play?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So to clarify a little bit, these were recently passed laws for the state of California. SB 9 created a pathway for many parcels within what are called, it's a census designated urban cluster, which applies to, I mean, broadly, it applies to the areas that you would think of as being more or less urban in Humboldt County. So Eureka and the surrounding area, Arcata and the surrounding area, McKinleyville, and I think some of the other cities as well, though not all. I don't think Blue Lake is included, for instance. And it created a pathway for building a duplex or doing a lot split, creating two lots out of one on your property without a public process, which this is a big shift from what it was before. And so how does the rules relating to ADUs interface with SB 9? I think that what that would mean is, well, building a duplex then would be allowed in those specific areas, which is in many ways, it's like there's an upper limit. The difference is really that ADUs have this limit of 1,200 square feet, which you actually can go above in unincorporated Humboldt County, but you would need to do so with a special permit, making it a public process. But typically an ADU is a smaller structure and the primary residence is larger. But again, you're getting into more theoretical questions. If you had like two 1,200 square foot units that are attached, is it an attached ADU or is it a duplex? I think it's either, and depending on where you are, it actually might not matter your process that you go through. But I think the more interesting one is the lot split. So could theoretically someone do a lot split and then build two residences and two ADUs? And man, we have some very knowledgeable people on this call. I believe the answer is yes, that could happen. I don't think that you could do necessarily two duplexes on each, but I don't know. Jess, Sherry, do you have insight into how SB 9 and ADUs interface?
No, but it is a really an excellent question. I think that as every local jurisdiction is sort of breaking it down and looking at, as you said, at the intersection with the recent laws on ADUs, some of it might be a parcel by parcel specific question. And, as Keenan has said, working with a planner to see, given your parcel, how would these laws apply, both the ADU and the SB 9? And then just come up with a solution.
Yeah, so I just, in the chat, I put a link to the Housing and Grants website, webpage. And we recently did a multifamily rezone workshop, and I put a link to the PowerPoint in there. And that PowerPoint had some slides and information about SB 9 and SB 10. I think essentially SB 9 and SB 10 both allow ADUs to be incorporated into a development project. But how you do that is up to the project proponent in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah, thanks for chiming in on that, Andrew. And yeah, I guess this would be great to highlight the fact that SB 10 was absolutely a focus of the multifamily rezone presentation, and also the fact that you're catching us a little off balance with this question. I think in part it's because California has been passing new housing laws at really an incredible rate. And so we are figuring out, how to implement these things in real time. And again, those are the types of questions that are really important to be able to answer. So thanks.
Okay, our next question is, can someone build an attached ADU in a converted garage and a detached ADU on the same property?
So you are allowed to do what's called a junior accessory dwelling unit in addition to a detached accessory dwelling unit. A junior accessory dwelling unit is one that is within the primary residence. So, this would be the converted bedroom or potentially the converted garage. And then also do a detached ADU in addition to that. There's a couple limitations to be aware of. One is that for all junior accessory dwelling units, that is the creation of the other dwelling unit within your house, it requires owner occupancy. So you need to live in either the main unit, or you could theoretically live in the small junior accessory dwelling unit. And the term period for that is, I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 years, but you're going to be living on site. The other special provision for that is that there's a maximum square footage of the detached ADU, and I believe that maximum square footage is 800 square feet. But it is theoretically possible. The next step would be to talk to a planner.
One thing I wanted to mention about junior accessory dwelling units is it's sort of just a departmental policy that the building department has adopted, that there isn't going to be a firewall required between the primary and the junior accessory dwelling unit. So, and that just applies to the junior accessory dwelling unit. So if there's an attached ADU, there will be required to be a firewall separating those two units, but not for JADUs. So.
Wish you were on the case when I got my permit, Rudy. That would have saved me a bundle.
Yeah.
Our next question is, how do we get information on incorporated areas within Humboldt County?
Yeah, great question. And I'd recommend going to Google and typing in, whether it's Arcata or Trinidad, Arcata Planning Department, and just give them a call. And I'm sure that they're getting a lot of ADU questions, and they should be able to help you out and get you pointed in the right direction.
Thank you. My next question is there a local manufacturer of ADUs the county knows of? Can Humboldt County partner or fund a factory that is building ADUs?
I think that there is no specified local manufacturer. And I think the challenge here, Franklin, is getting the HCD permit approval for those manufactured housing units. I don't think any local housing manufacturer has done that. But if they can, I believe that there would be a market for those type of housing products. It's permitted through HCD, unless Rudy wants to disagree with me on that.
No, I think you're spot on there. Franklin actually made a comment later down mentioning Humboldt Homes, which is a new company that are building storage containers. I think they're kind of just recently starting, but that's a resource that is going to be coming soon. I think is Humboldt Homes.
Yeah, and I believe that we've been in communication. I think it's with Humboldt Homes, but they're working with containers, and I think it is out in Hoopa, and getting some plans approved. So I think that there is something in the works, and absolutely, keep the eyes and ears out for that coming online, because if we had, that resource available to the public, I think it would be a great boon.
Okay, thank you. Just want to take a moment to reflect where we are in our agenda. We are scheduled to end at 7:30 p.m. We're going to continue about 5 more minutes in our Q&A, and then we have a couple additional polls and resources to share with you. We have answered 41 questions. We do have 27 left that are open. So obviously won't be able to answer all 27 in the next 5 minutes, but we will collect those for our team to review after the workshop. So our next question is, I have a large lot, almost 2 areas with several easements. Who can help me figure out if and where I can site an ADU?
Yeah, I think that would be, one potential answer. And I think probably the first recommended step would be to talk to a planner. And I put the number in the chat, 445-7541. And we'll be able to look at your parcel and let you know if there are any constraints on it.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is the services to that parcel will kind of affect the development potential of it. Unless you're wanting to put in an on-site septic system and a well. So, but if it's a large parcel, you may consider a subdivision. You may consider looking at a multifamily rezone. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is create more housing opportunities on the same footprint that we've already established for our residential areas. So sounds like you got potential, and it would be worth talking to a planner for sure.
Our next question is, does a conversation with a planner cost money? Pre-application meeting, how much?
So talking to a planner just at the counter or on the phone is free. We do, just in the interest of, responsibly using public funds, we try to keep those conversations to about 15 or 20 minutes. But we can talk with you about your parcel. And then the application assistance meeting is really geared towards when you have a project in mind and you've sketched it out, you have a concrete idea of what you want to apply for. And then you set up this meeting, and I'm trying to find the latest fee schedule. It's a couple $100. Is it 150? Is it 200? I can't remember. It's a couple $100, and you sit down with a planner. They look at all the information and give you the definitive list of what you need to gather and get together to submit a complete application to our office.
Thanks, Keenan. I think we will take 2 more questions. One is, can you have more than one ADU on a property?
Yeah, so the way that you can have more than one ADU on a property, I think I went over a minute ago, is if you have a junior accessory dwelling unit within the primary, and then you also have that detached, requires on-site residence. The detached can only be up to 800 square feet.
Okay, and last question that we have time for live is, are ADUs held to parking requirements?
Great question. The parking requirements are different for ADUs. I'm going to see if I can. Oh, I guess we do have it in our ordinance, actually. See if I can find what it says exactly. So each ADU requires one parking space. The spaces may be provided in tandem, which tandem is when you have one car parked here and the car parks behind it on the driveway. Off-street parking shall be permitted in setback areas. So that means that whereas normally you can't have the primary parking for a residence within the front yard setback, the parking for an ADU you can, and that's that, that tandem parking is allowed. Unless specific findings are made that parking in the setback is not feasible based on specific site or regional topographical or fire life safety conditions. So likely you'll be able to park in that setback. There are exceptions to the parking standards. The parking standard for an ADU shall not apply if you're within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit, if you're located within an architecturally and historically significant district, which I don't know if we have any of those in unincorporated Humboldt County, if you're part of the proposed or existing primary residence, part of the proposed or existing primary residence or an existing accessory structure. Oh, so if you're not adding a new structure, or when on-street parking permits are required but not offered to the occupant of the ADU, or when there's car share vehicle located within one block. And in housing opportunity zones, which finding out the exact mapping of the housing opportunity zone would, again, be a matter of talking to a planner, though this is something, it's one of the layers on our web GIS. If you dare to try to find it, housing opportunity zone, but probably talking to a planner would be the easiest route. For ADUs less than 1,000 square feet, no parking shall be required. So answer, it depends. But parking rules are different for ADUs than they are for primary residences.
Thanks, Keenan. Okay, so that's going to conclude our Q&A session tonight. I want to thank all the panelists for that marathon Q&A. I think we did about 45 minutes. It looks like over 50 questions answered. We do, again, still have 20 questions open. Oh, it just went to 21. We recognize that we didn't have time to get to all of these questions. We do apologize for that. Again, we'll collect them for our team to review after the workshop. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go to our 5th poll. That is on your screen now. Our question is, did you find this community workshop beneficial? Please select all that apply. Your answer choices are, yes, I felt like I was able to engage with Humboldt County staff. Yes, I learned new information about ADUs and housing in Humboldt County. Yes, I was able to interact with other community members in Humboldt County, or no, this was not beneficial to me. And again, you can select all that apply. Okay, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and select your answer choices on your screen. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Again, our question was, did you find this community workshop beneficial? Please select all that apply. For yes, I felt like I was able to engage with Humboldt County staff, received 63%. Yes, I learned new information about accessory dwelling units and housing in Humboldt County, 91%. Yes, I was able to interact with other community members in Humboldt County, 24%. And no, this was not beneficial to me, 0%. And again, these percentages add up to more than 100% because you can select more than one answer. So thanks so much for letting us know your participation with the workshop. We appreciate it. Next slide, please. All right, so we want to thank you again for taking the time to join us this evening. We very much appreciate your engagement, your input, and your questions. Next slide, please. Resources from this workshop will be posted on Humboldt County's Planning and Building Department's website, the link that's in blue on this slide, as well as in the chat. The resources will also be sent out via email to all those who registered for this workshop, and that will include the recording of the workshop and the slides as a PDF document. If you'd like to connect with Humboldt County, you can contact Andrew Whitney, Housing and Grants Program Coordinator, by phone at 707-445-7541, or by email at awhitney2@co.humboldt.ca.us. So I'm going to leave this slide on the screen for just a moment. As we mentioned at the beginning of the workshop, we're now going to open up the chat so that you can share resources with us and with one another regarding ADUs. So let me do that. Okay. So I've just opened up the chat, so please feel free to add information into the chat at this time. Again, you're welcome to share resources with us and with one another. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to our sixth and final poll. This poll uses Zoom's advanced polling feature, which is available on the newest version of Zoom. If you have an older version of Zoom, you may not be able to see the poll. And if that's the case, you're invited to submit via the Q&A if you would like to participate in the poll, but have that older version of Zoom. I'll read the poll aloud and keep the Zoom workshop open for a few minutes so you can think about and respond to the poll. Please feel free to leave the workshop once you have responded to the poll. Again, we thank you so much for your participation tonight and your questions and your input. So our final poll is, do you have suggestions for additional Humboldt County training or resources regarding ADUs or improvements to existing resources? Please describe. And so I'm noting that it's 7:27 and I'm going to keep the workshop open until 7:30 p.m. Please feel free to submit your final poll, share resources in the chat, add another question into the Q&A for us. And again, we very much appreciate your participation. So thank you so much and have a good night.